Hey, good morning, you guys. Welcome to Shift. My name is Joe Smith. I'm the family pastor here. And I heard that Brad mentioned something about football this morning. And so I wanted to talk to you guys about football all day. And because that's all we talk about. I'm kidding. I just messing with Brad. But it was so good, was it not? If you're not a football fan, then I'm sorry. But it was amazing to sit and watch. And you can see where my allegiance lies. I root for the Gators, 364, all right, except for when they play Missouri, and then we're going to root for the Tigers. So don't sleep on us just because yesterday was a snoozer. I'm just saying, just watch out. But for the last several weeks, we have been in the book of Matthew. Matthew was a Jewish follower of Jesus, and he wrote this letter from a Jewish perspective to a Jewish audience. And his agenda in that letter was the outsider. Matthew, if you're not familiar with his story, was a tax collector, kind of on the outside looking in, was considered a traitor, and then Jesus showed up and gave him a second chance. And so his whole letter is about people on the outside looking in. And we've been looking through honestly, some difficult stuff. About forgiveness and mercy and the hard work that forgiveness is, and being generous, living with a good eye. That's what we talked about last week, this idea of when Jesus said that our eyes are a lamp to our body. If we see the world with a good eye, the light is big. If we see the world with a bad eye, then how great is that darkness? And it was the idea of how we see the world. Do we see the world through a generous lens, or do we see the world through a stingy lens? And how we see the world affects everything about how we interact with it, right? And one of the things that I talked about was living generously. And I'll be really honest. I had mentioned before that in that idea of forgiveness, that one of the things that we have to do is let go of making somebody that's done us wrong, letting go of the idea of making them pay, right? And it's funny how when you say things out loud, how circumstances kind of work their way around. And this past week, I'd mentioned it, and some people that I struggle with kind of jumped back into my life for a second, and all of those feelings came back up. And Tori was like in the middle of it. She was like, "Do you remember what you just said?" And I was like, "Oh, Jesus and his words," and I had to really okay, do I believe this stuff that we're talking about? Because real life showed up for a minute, and we had to work through that. But this stuff is hard, right? And if anybody tells you otherwise, they're lying. This is hard work. I mean, this isn't something that the words of Jesus, man. If we take them seriously, I feel like a lot of times we just kind of fairy tale stuff that Jesus talked about, because this stuff is incredibly difficult to do, and it's no different today. And so what we're going to do is we're going to continue in Matthew chapter 6, and we're going to look at, or Matthew 7 rather. We're going to look at some of the most misunderstood teachings of Jesus today. And so we're just going to jump right in it. So we're going to have it up on the screen for you, and it starts this way: "Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." So let's stop right there, all right? Because I think this is probably one of the most famous passages that Jesus ever said. Don't judge, lest you be judged. You guys know that I'm a Metallica fan, or if you didn't, you do now. And they even have a whole song based on this verse. Who knew Metallica was so holy? Just saying. But they have a whole song based on this, and don't judge. Don't judge lest you be judged, right? But what is Jesus really talking about here? Because is he saying, am I not supposed to be able to come to you, a brother or sister, or you come to me as a brother or sister and be like, "Hey, Joe, listen, man, that really wasn't cool, or I'm kind of seeing some stuff. Now, of course, that's all based on relationship. Like if you just come out of nowhere and start, okay, that's going to be uncomfortable. But if we're friends and I'm doing something stupid and you come to me out of concern or out of love, is Jesus really saying, don't do that? Because there are plenty of other times where Jesus does say to do that. So maybe, once again, it's our understanding of what Jesus is talking about that's off, and not Jesus telling us something that contradicts something else that he says down the road. So one of the things that we have to realize here is that there were three types of judgment during this time period when Jesus was talking. And the first is judicial, right? It's a judge. He's making a ruling. A judge is doing his job. So is Jesus actually saying judges should make rulings? No, that would be dumb, right? The second is discernment. And that's one that we have. I mean, we talk about that today, right? Like we're judging something like, is this a good thing or a bad thing, right? And we still do that. That's something that we do now, right? Is this scenario good or is it bad? Should I be here? Should I not be here? Should I say this thing? Should I not say this thing? I was talking with somebody earlier, and I had a conversation this week. And during this conversation, I was thinking, should I say this next thing or not? Will this bring value to it? Will it add to this conversation, or will it be a distraction in this conversation? And I ultimately judged that it would have been a distraction. So I didn't bring it up because I was judging. So is Jesus really saying you shouldn't use discernment? No. So then the third way that people use this term was value. And this is the idea that Jesus is driving at, which is in line with everything that he's been talking about, because kingdom living, everything when he started, the kingdom of heaven is for those on the outside looking in, for the poor in spirit. From that point forward, Jesus is talking about two things: our hearts and how we treat people. And this is right along with that. He's saying you cannot devalue a person. You are in no place to assign or take away value of another human being. Don't do it. Don't assign or take away value of a person, because if you try to do that, guess what? By the same measure that you're valuing people, that's how God's going to value you. That's how the measuring stick is going to be with you. And I don't know about you, but I have done that before, and I would hate to have to use the same measuring stick that I have used for people against myself. And so Jesus jumps right into it, and he's not saying that we shouldn't speak to one another in love, right? He's not saying that we shouldn't use discernment. He's saying that we're in no position to assign value. And if we do that, then it's going to be the same measuring stick against us. So let's keep on going on. Let's keep on. And then he says this: why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite. Now remember, when Jesus says hypocrite, he simply means actor. It's not somebody that says one thing and does another. It's somebody that does something for the approval of the people around them, okay? Just remember that. They're acting. You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Which goes along with that idea of coming to me in discernment, right? Of as a brother or sister. But this is such an odd saying. Why is he talking about specks and planks? Now, speck, yeah, you have a speck in your eye. We've all had that. Anybody had a plank of wood in their eye before? I've never seen that happen. I've seen splinters. I've even seen a fish hook one time, but I've never seen a 2x4 coming out of somebody's face, out of their eye specifically. All right, so maybe Jesus is referring to something else, because I mentioned it earlier when he talked about what? The eyes are a lamp of the body, how we see the world. So maybe he's referring back to that teaching once again and talking about it in a different way so that we remember what he's talking about. If you're seeing the world through this bad lens, if you're seeing the world in a crummy way, in a stingy way, in an unhealthy way, then how can you possibly pinpoint something else from somebody else? Like, you got to take care of your own worldview first. Like, you got to take care of how you see the world, how you interact with the world, versus nitpicking on everybody else. Remember we talked about Mr. Dairy Queen last week? Karen's. Sorry if your name is Karen. But I think Jesus is talking about this again and saying, hey, maybe, just maybe, we should stop worrying about how everybody else is doing, whatever, and really start to focus on my walk, my life first. Because if I'm seeing the world stingy, if I'm devaluing people, and then I'm nitpicking on others, which goes right into what I'm getting ready to say next. Look at what Jesus says next, this is a really weird. Look, do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. I don't have pearls, number one. And number two, I'm thinking if I had pearls, that I would literally, that thought would never enter my mind. What should I do with these pearls? You know what? Let's just toss them to the pigs. I don't have pigs, but if I did, I don't think that thought would ever, if I lived 1,000 years, would be like, I'm going to take my pearls and throw them at that pig. If you do, they may trample them under your feet and turn and tear you to pieces. Now, what in the world is Jesus talking about? Because he's talking about 2x4s and eyeballs and specks and throwing, don't give dogs sacred stuff and pigs pearls and they're going to tear you to pieces. What we have to understand is, again, maybe Jesus is talking about something that they understood, but that we don't. So, dogs and pigs were nicknames, what they would call Gentiles. Jewish people in first century, Israel would refer to Gentiles as dogs and pigs. And that sounds super harsh, doesn't it? I mean, yes, there is a definite negative connotation here, but during this time period, it wasn't as negative as it feels today, all right? So when Jesus says this, he's talking about all of those on the outside looking in. He's talking about others, again. He's talking about everybody that the people he's talking to thinks are on the outside and does not have God's favor. And he's talking about them. Now, what is sacred and pearls are also nicknames, euphemisms for Torah, for Old Testament teachings. And so what he's saying is, and it's in other places where he talks about a string of pearls. It's a string of teachings, all right? Wisdom, they're referred to as pearls. And so what he's saying here is, Jesus follower, I think this is what he's saying to us, but what he's saying is, you can't take Torah. He's talking specifically about Old Testament laws. You can't take this and then set the standard for a group of people that haven't agreed to live by that standard. So for us today, if you're a Jesus follower, you can't take the standard that Jesus set for our life that we have agreed to follow and apply it to a people that have not agreed to that standard. So it would be like going into a room and being just a group of people and they're doing something that you think is wrong and you just stopping the party and being like, excuse me, but in John chapter 2, verses 19, Jesus says, and you have to stop doing this. Now, how well would that go over? How well does it go over when somebody tries to thump you with a Bible? Even if you're a Jesus follower, how fun is that? Not at all, right? And so that's why Jesus is saying, no, don't do that, because if you do that, if you are looking for this speck in your brother's eye, when you've got this huge plank, when you're seeing things unhealthy, and you start nitpicking and you start applying the standard that you've agreed to, that others haven't, and when you start doing that, guess what they're going to do to the sacred, to wisdom? They're going to trample it, and they're going to turn on you. And how many of you have seen that happen? How many of you have had that happen to you when you've mistakenly done that? Or when somebody came at you and they didn't have that relationship with you? Did that feel good? No, of course it didn't. Of course it didn't. So then Jesus goes on, and he says something else here. He starts talking about prayer because this is hard stuff. Like, aren't there times where you just want to do some of these things, though? Like, whether it's because they've wronged you in the past, this idea of forgiveness, or maybe you don't feel like being merciful, or maybe you just really, That's, ugh, you know what I mean? Maybe it's a hot button for you, and you just want to throw down, and it's so easy right now, right? I'm just going to get on Facebook, and I'm going to hit share, ugh, and I'm going to stick it to them. And so then Jesus says this, ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find it. Knock, and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives. For the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks, the door will be opened. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, he will give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? And I think he says this because he knows that this is difficult. Living out kingdom life is not easy. Very few of these things come second nature to us. They don't to me. And so Jesus is saying, you have to participate in this. Like, you're not going to be able to do this alone. And if you try, you might do it well for a season. You might do it well for a minute, but you're not going to do it well all the time. Even with God's help, you guys, I struggle in this. This is hard. And so Jesus is saying, ask. Okay, but notice what he's not saying. He's not saying, I need you to pray for these things, and then I need you to just sit back and relax. He's not saying, start praying for this stuff, and I will take care of all of it. I had a friend one time put it this way to me. He's like, it would be like you're leaning on a shovel, and you're asking God for a hole in the ground. It doesn't make any sense. Like, you have the means to be a part of the answer to the prayer right there. And I really feel like that's the reason that Jesus used specifically the words that he uses. He said, ask, right? Seek, and knock. Those are verbs. Those are things that we do. Kingdom life is very rarely passive. Even in the season of waiting, we're still called to pursue. We're still called to do something. Ask. I got to ask for it. I got to go to him and say, hey, Jesus, man, I need this. And he says, great. If you ask me, I'll give it to you. Seek. The one who seeks is going to find it. I've got to pursue it. Knock. He's going to open the door. He doesn't say like this wishy-washy, well, if you do it and you got enough faith, or if it's the right verbiage, it's the right phrase, it's the right this or that, or it's the seek. He says, no, if you ask, I'll give it to you. If you seek, you'll find it. If you knock, I'll open the door. If you do this, then I will do this. Kingdom life isn't passive. We're not called to sit back. We're called to continue. Even in the waiting, we're called to pursue. And we know this because look at what he says next. So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets. Now hold on a second. So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up all the teachings of the Old Testament. Everything the Old Testament was meant for us to understand, the lens through which we understand God, it's seen through how we treat other people. And we're called to treat them like we want to be treated. Now, most of the time, that's referred to as what? Right, the golden rule. And it's been, you don't even have to be in church to know that one, right? Treat others as you want to be treated. We've turned it into this little thing. It's a refrigerator magnet, or we use it with our kids, like when they're little, right? And we want them to learn how to share and how to be nice with each other. So we tell them, no, you treat little Johnny how you want to be treated. And so then little Susie understands, well, I want to be treated this way, so I'm going to treat Johnny, I'm going to share or whatever because I want him to share with me, right? And that's kind of how we've used it. But when we water it down, when we take it out of its context. Because yes, we should treat others how we want to be treated, and that is a good rule. But Jesus is talking about so much more deeper, because when we pack it back into what he was saying, it becomes something profound. It becomes a linchpin of following Jesus because the verse follows the teachings about mercy. If we want to pursue God's righteousness, if we want to hunger and thirst, like he says in the Beatitudes in Matthew chapter 5, if we want to pursue God's righteousness, his mercy, right? If we want to do those things, it follows the teachings about forgiveness. It follows the teachings about being generous and generous living. It follows the teachings about loving your enemies and praying for those that persecute you. It follows those teachings by honoring God, not devaluing others, not worrying. Those are hard things, and not a single one of those things is something that we're just going to do. Not a single one. And they're so hard that Jesus is, before he says this one sentence, he says you've got to ask for the ability to do them. Right? So would he have all of these crazy hard teachings, all of these things that are difficult for us to do, and then follow it up with this refrigerator magnet nicety? No way. There's no way. So there's something deeper here. And we know this because of what he says in his very next sentence. He says this: enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction. And many enter through it, but small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Now I want to notice something here, that we're not talking about, Jesus is not talking about eternity. He's not talking in eternal language. And Jesus has no problem talking about eternal language because he does it multiple times. Like, as a matter of fact, in the New Testament, 11 times Jesus references hell, and it's only mentioned one other time outside of Jesus. So he has no issue talking about eternity or using eternal language, but he doesn't do that here. So he's not talking about eternity. What he's talking about is intention. That living this kingdom life isn't something that you will stumble into, that you have to do it intentionally. It's like, so you guys know, my son and I, we dig the whole wrestling stuff, right? And I've told you before, we've been to multiple shows. We've been to WrestleMania. But there's this one stadium that we went to down in Orlando, and I can't remember which stadium it was, but, no, it was Tampa. It's where the team plays hockey, all right? And as you're coming off, a few years ago, there was a ton of construction. And the exit that we had to get off on, or get on the highway, was on the right side, and like less than a quarter mile away, across like 5 or 6 lanes, was the other exit that I needed to hit, all right? And I'm sure that you guys have been on highways like that. I mean, if you've ever been to Atlanta, I mean, they're all like that. And you've got to cross like 1,600 miles before you can get to that exit, and it's like on-ramp, off-ramp, and you got to Frogger your way over. And so the first time that I did that, I totally missed it because I wasn't ready for it to be that fast and on the other side of the highway. So then I had to like loop back around through all of this traffic. And then the second time, like, I knew where it was, and I was like, my hands were on the wheel, and I was like using my blinker back and forth, and I was jumping and jiving and all this stuff. And I had to be super intentional about hitting that exit. It's the same idea. Jesus is saying here that you can't live kingdom life by accident. It's not going to happen. You have to live it with intention. And I'm going to say this. Hear me when I say this next sentence. The golden rule is the narrow gate. The golden rule is the narrow gate. When Jesus says the word life, right, in that sentence, can you bring that passage back up real fast? I know I didn't have it in the notes there. That's my bad. Can you go back and bring up the verse 13 real fast? When Jesus says, but small is the gate, if you can't, don't worry about it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. That word life is a qualitative term. It's a particular kind of life. It doesn't mean you're going to find life, oh, I'm alive. No, it is a qualitative term, and it means life abundant. It means a full life. And so Jesus is saying, yes, this is hard and you're going to need my help with it, but there's hope. He said, ask, seek, knock, and he'll give us this. That he'll give it to us and that he would help us live kingdom life intentionally. And that when we live this intentional kingdom life, yes, it's going to be hard, but your life is going to be so stinking full of life that it makes it all worth it. Because guys, the reality is that loving people is hard. It's not now. It's always been hard. Being merciful is hard. Loving people is hard. Giving second chances to people is hard. And that doesn't come a second hand to many of us, not to me. But Jesus said, if you come after this life, that he would deliver it. And so hear me when I say this, Shift. It matters. This matters right now. Because Gainesville needs to see the way of Jesus lived out in real and tangible ways in the everyday, in the mundane, on Monday morning, at school, at home, in our neighborhoods, on our teams. Gainesville needs to see this. That we are here to love and to serve this city when so many people are ready to fight. They're ready to stand their ground and make their, I'm planting my flag here. And yes, there are times for that, but man, we have got to let Jesus draw those lines. And we've got to show people that the way of Jesus isn't about politics. It's not about right or left. It's not about who's right and who's wrong. It's not us versus them. It's Jesus, man, and it's a third way. And what if, Shift, what if a group of people actually took that call seriously and said, you know what, I'm going to lay down some of this other stuff, the secondary stuff, and I'm going to love people. And what if a group of people said, hey, we're going to create a community where people can actually show up and belong before they believe anything, before they start doing anything, that no, we're going to love them right there, as is. And maybe even more importantly than that, what if there was a place, a community of people that gave others the time and space to wrestle with the words of Jesus? What if there was a community that looked like that in the middle of Gainesville? That loved people and then gave them the time and space to wrestle with this stuff. What could happen? What could happen? Shift, that's us. Right here, right now. That's us. Like if that's not us, then there's no point. There's just not a point because there's lots of buildings people can go to. And we're not the only one. Guys, here's the reality. We're not the answer. Shift Church is not the answer to the problems that Gainesville faces. Jesus is the answer to the problems that Gainesville faces. But we have this massive opportunity to live out this kingdom life and then point people to Jesus, the one that can fix these problems. To live with intention, to understand that how we treat people through Jesus is the narrow way. And that's why he says that. It's so hard to treat people this way, and that's why the other way is this way, because it's so easy to just be a jerk. Ask my wife. She lives with one. We have this amazing opportunity to show people who Jesus is by living this out with intention. Ask, seek, knock, pursue those things in your life, right? And then live out this idea of kingdom with intention. Before I close with prayer, I want to pray for us. But I want to put a plug in for two things. One of the ways that we're going to do this is with our small groups. And so if you haven't plugged into a small group, I want you to do that. And you can do that with that QR code that's up there. And one of the ways that we're doing that, not just with community and giving everybody that opportunity to have that community, but to also then go and serve the city, because every 4, 6, 7 weeks, those small groups are going to pick a place and they're going to go serve that place. And so we're going to live that out. We're going to actively pursue that, all right? And the second is this, is that mark your calendars. You got an email this week. You're going to see stuff on social media. But we're asking everybody, whether you're here in person or on the stream, to make next week a priority. That please, we're asking you to make next week a priority. And that if there are other things involved, that if you can set them aside for just this time to do so, and to make it a priority to be here. Because next week, we've got some things to talk through, and we've got some announcements. And Shift, it's like, what is today's date? Today is the 5th, right? So the 12th is going to be like, Shift was this before the 12th and this after the 12th. And so we want everybody to be here to celebrate and to hear what we're going to be talking about. And if I've piqued your interest, then good. If you're not here, then you can catch it on the stream at 6 o'clock. But man, we would love for you guys to be here in person if at all possible. But I want to pray for you guys, and then I'm going to turn it over to Sam. But I want to challenge us with this idea of like really being intentional with the kingdom life, of living out this full and abundant life that Jesus has designed us for, and to show other people what that looks like. Let's pray. Father, we just thank you for this morning. We thank you for this time that we have to gather in your name. Jesus, I thank you for your words. I thank you for this past week, the opportunity to live that out. And man, it stunk so much in the middle of it. But Lord, I'm just thankful because even in that, Lord, you showed up. And you said, ask. And so I had to. And you showed up. And so, God, I'm so thankful for that. And Lord, I pray that as we get ready to leave this place, God, I pray that we do so changed. Whether we're drawing closer to you to live out this kingdom life, or we're taking steps towards you as we're figuring out what this means. But that we do so changed, knowing that you care deeply about how we treat people, about how we love and serve those around us. That this thing that we call following you isn't just about saying the right things or attending the right things or singing the right things, but it's about the other 6 days of the week, 6.5 days of the week. And so, God, I pray that as we leave this place, that we do so ready to live this out, that we do so with intention, that we're going and we're going out there to serve and to love our friends and our families and our neighbors and our coworkers and our students, the people we sit next to in class, the people that we compete against on the field. But God, that we live this out. God, I pray that you give us opportunities to love this city. We're so thankful that you have placed us in the here and now, in the middle of all of this chaos. God, I pray that you work through us in a huge and mighty way. Not so that Shift becomes something, but so that your kingdom grows and so that people can really see who you are. That it just cuts through all the junk that's out there right now. And that they see something just radically different in us because of who you are. Lord, we're thankful. And go with us this week as we point people to you. In your name we pray. Amen.